Okay, let's dive right into this explainer by starting with a massive medical mystery, one that completely challenges everything we think we know about that thin line between life and death. For centuries, humans have wondered what exactly happens when the lights go out. But rarely do we get to examine this question under the bright, sterile lights of a modern operating room. So we're going to look closely at what the science, the skeptics, and the survivors actually tell us.
So picture this. It's August 1991 at the Barrow Neurological Institute down in Phoenix. A 35-year-old woman named Pam Reynolds was facing a brain tumor that literally could have burst at any second. The only way to save her was a procedure so incredibly extreme that doctors actually had to induce clinical death. By every medical definition, Pam was dead. Her heartbeat was completely stopped by machines, all the blood was drained from her head and her brainwaves, totally flatlined. Her eyes were taped shut, and they even put speakers playing loud, continuous clicks into her ears just to ensure there was absolutely zero brain response. And yet, what she reported after she woke up completely shocked the medical world.
She didn't just claim to float above her body. No, she actually brought back receipts. While her brain was entirely shut down, completely unresponsive to the outside world, she accurately described the specific, highly specialized tools the surgeons were using. She even perfectly recounted the exact conversations the medical team was having, noting remarks like, "Keep the field clear." Remember, she was blindfolded, her ears were plugged with speakers mimicking the roar of a literal subway train, and her brain was off. So, how on earth did she see and hear all of this?
It's the kind of question that just gives you chills, right? Did we actually just find out what happens after death? This seemingly impossible case really forces us to ask if human consciousness somehow survives the death of the physical body. Can you still exist when your brain doesn't?
Section 1. Searching for the soul. The quest for proof.
To really understand how we got to this incredible medical anomaly, we kind of have to trace our steps back a bit. Believing in an afterlife isn't just some fringe, out-there idea. It is a massively shared global phenomenon that spans incredibly diverse cultures and continents. When you look at the global numbers, 85% in Indonesia, 70% in the US, 66% in Brazil, it's everywhere. Every major religion on Earth has talked about the soul, about heaven and hell. But, science demands proof, and for the longest time, researchers have been desperately trying to find it in the physical world.
And this deep global hunger for physical proof brings us to a very famous number, 21 grams. Back in 1901, you had this guy, Dr. Duncan McDougall, who famously tried to actually quantify the soul. He did this by weighing a dying tuberculosis patient on a massive, specialized scale. He noted this sudden, unexplained 21-gram weight drop at the exact moment of death. He claimed, that's it, that's the weight of the human soul leaving the body. Now, obviously, critics quickly debunked this as just mere fluid evaporation from breath and sweat. And funnily enough, when McDougall tried the exact same experiment on dogs, their weight didn't change at all, which he conveniently blamed on animals just not having souls. But honestly, it just goes to show how incredibly hungry we are for hard physical evidence of the afterlife.
Section 2. Anatomy of an NDE. Near-death experiences.
Let's fast forward a bit to 1975. That's a really pivotal year because it's when Professor Raymond Moody officially coined the term near-death experience, or NDE. He'd been collecting all these stories from people who had seemingly returned from the dead, and he realized they were sharing incredibly similar, almost identical stories. Across Moody's 150 documented cases, these experiences almost universally followed this really specific, profound sequence. First, hearing themselves pronounced dead, then moving through a long, dark tunnel. Next, an out-of-body observation where they literally watch doctors perform CPR on their lifeless shell. Then they meet deceased relatives, they encounter this radiant being of light, and finally they experience a rapid life review before hitting some sort of boundary they just can't cross. But is this universal structure absolute proof of a spirit realm?
Well, here's the catch. Skeptics point out a totally fascinating wrinkle. The specific details of these visions are heavily shaped by cultural expectations. In the West, for example, patients often report meeting St. Peter at the pearly gates. But over in India, patients like Chaju and Durga reported being taken to Yamaraj, the Hindu god of death. They encountered clerks with record books and were actually told there was a clerical error, that they were grabbed by mistake. This distinct cultural flavor really plants a seed of doubt, making us wonder if maybe these visions are just constructed by the mind rather than being some objective reality that everyone enters.
Section 3. Dying brain visions. The science of NDEs.
So, if these aren't literal journeys into the afterlife, what is physically happening inside the human skull at the exact moment of death?
In a highly reputable 2001 study published in the Lancet Medical Journal, researchers interviewed 344 patients who were clinically dead from cardiac arrest and brought back via CPR. A staggering 18% of those patients reported experiencing the afterlife. That proved these experiences are incredibly common, challenging science to explain how on earth consciousness can persist when the heart literally stops pumping blood.
The scientific pushback here relies really heavily on something called the dependence thesis. It's basically the entire foundation of modern neuroscience, stating that absolutely every mental experience, every thought, feeling, and memory you have, depends entirely on physical brain activity. Basically, no brain, no thoughts. If we accept this medical thesis, it means that an out-of-body experience just shouldn't be possible without a functioning brain. So psychologists had to start looking for biological triggers that could be creating this illusion of an afterlife.
Psychologist Susan Blackmore does a fantastic job of steelmanning the scientific argument here by breaking down what's known as the dying brain hypothesis. She suggests that what feels like a journey to the afterlife is actually just the totally predictable biological fireworks of a brain running out of oxygen. That famous dark tunnel? It's just random cell firing in an oxygen-starved visual cortex, where your center vision stays bright but the edges fade to black. That overwhelming feeling of deep peace? Just extreme stress triggering a massive natural release of endorphins and morphine in the body. The life review? Endorphin-induced seizures in the temporal lobe, which is exactly where your memories are stored. Even the out-of-body experience is theorized to be just the brain's psychological coping mechanism as it systematically breaks down.
A perfect example of this in action is GLOC, which stands for G-force-induced loss of consciousness. Think about totally healthy fighter pilots. When they are spun at crazy high speeds in massive human centrifuges, the G-force violently pulls all the blood and oxygen away from their brains. They pass out, and when they wake up, they report the exact same dark tunnels and profound feelings of peace. This strongly suggests that you don't actually need to be dying or crossing into the spirit world to have a near-death experience. You literally just need to cut off oxygen to the brain.
Section 4. Lingering Mysteries. Unexplained Phenomena.
So, case closed, right? Brain chemistry explains it all? Well, not exactly. Because if we apply those strict scientific rules back to Pam Reynolds, the whole theory kind of breaks down. Remember, during surgery, her body was cooled to a freezing 16 degrees Celsius. Her eyes were taped shut. Those 33 Hz clicks were blasting in her ears 11 to 33 times a second, literally as loud as a passing train. And most importantly, her brain was entirely, measurably shut off. Despite all of these absolute, physical barriers to sensory input and conscious thought, Pam still perceived the operating room with impossible clarity.
She said, "It looked like the handle of my electric toothbrush." I mean, not only did she accurately describe this highly specialized pneumatic bone saw they used to open her skull, but she also knew the doctors had shocked her heart twice to revive her. That is a highly specific detail that even the lead surgeon, Dr. Robert Spetzler, had completely forgotten until he actually went back and checked the surgical logs. How could an oxygen-deprived, flatlined brain hallucinate a real-world reality it couldn't possibly see or hear?
So, to finally find conclusive, undeniable evidence of the soul and to solve wild mysteries like Pam's, Dr. Sam Parnia ran what's known as the AWARE study. Over 4 years, across 15 different hospitals, scientists placed 1,000 hidden shelves near the ceiling in rooms where cardiac arrests happen the most. They placed unique images on these shelves that could only be seen if you were physically floating up near the ceiling. The logic was brilliant, right? If out-of-body experiences are real, a floating soul would see the image. Out of over 2,000 patients studied, a handful had really vivid NDEs, but not a single one could identify the hidden images. The ultimate scientific proof remained entirely elusive.
So, where exactly does all of this leave us? Ultimately, sometimes a mystery is just that, a mystery waiting for biology to catch up. Whether the light at the end of the tunnel is a literal glimpse of heaven or just the final, beautiful sparks of a dying brain, the greatest takeaway from this explainer is pretty clear. Since no one has brought back concrete, repeatable proof of the other side, shouldn't we view this life as our one guaranteed opportunity? Instead of just waiting for an unproven afterlife, maybe our greatest purpose is to create a little piece of heaven right here on Earth. What will you do with yours?